Okay, I am recording now, and then I'll share my screen for the presentation, and then Grace, feel free to kick it off. Fernando, if you don't mind checking the participant list and continue to add people as they come in, that would be great. Thank you.
I'll do that.
Okay, Grace.
Oh, great. Yeah, I was just waiting for you to share the screen. Sorry,
Okay.
but I can go ahead and start.
Oh, is it not sharing?
I don't, is it just me? I just see everybody. Nobody else sees it.
Okay, let me try again. What about now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
So I want to say hi to everyone and thank you so much for making it to the 21st Steering Committee meeting for the Near Northwest Area Plan. We really appreciate how much time and energy you guys have all put into this project. You can do next slide, Sung. So this is our timeline. We're right before we're about to release the entire draft plan to the public. So thank you so much for helping to get us here to this point in the project. Next slide. I'll kind of quickly go over the Zoom rules. For some of you guys, you've heard many times. But for steering committee members, if you guys could turn on your video, especially when we're having discussion. And if everybody can mute when they're not speaking, just so we can keep background noise to a minimum. If you're having any technical issues, you can chat with Fernando. And as a reminder, we're so excited to see members of the public attending and listening in. But the discussion and the meeting chat will be with the steering committee members, and that's just to help us kind of manage our time a little better and to keep it to be a little less confusing. But at the end of the meeting, we'll reserve 10 minutes for questions and comments from the public. And you probably got a pop-up about this, but the meeting's being recorded. And so our meeting ground rules, I won't go over these word for word, but the big idea is just mainly kind of creating space so that all the steering committee members can contribute equally. So if you're someone who tends to be more quiet on the steering committee, I want to challenge you to kind of speak up because your ideas really help inform our discussion. And if you're somebody who tends to speak more, to just try to kind of hold back sometimes and create more space for other folks. And you guys are great at this, but using that hand raise function, so kind of keep track on who wants to speak. And we already talked about the video. Next slide. And then our agenda for today. So we're doing our opening now. And then so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the content that we discussed last month on land use and urban design. And we've kind of reworked that presentation. Some of you kind of came to that extra meeting. A couple of you came there. So we've kind of reworked that information because we wanted to make it more clear and more accessible to you guys. And so then we're going to have a discussion about the land use and urban design. And then we're going to present to you the focus areas. So that's just sort of looking at how these different ideas in land use might look in the different neighborhoods. And then hopefully we'll have time for a break, and then we'll come back and we're going to talk about how we're going to share how we're going to look at working with the community to get their feedback on how to prioritize the different draft recommendations. And we're also going to talk about kind of what implementation might look like and how the plan informs different actions in our community. And then we'll close, and that'll be time for just talking briefly about next steps, but then having time for public comment and questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Cheney.
Thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. As Grace said, we're just going to quickly revisit the land use discussion from the last steering committee meeting. We immediately followed that up with a special meeting to discuss these issues, but not everyone could attend that. So we wanted to give everyone the opportunity to kind of see these slides and understand that, to make sure that we're all on the same page. Next slide is fine. So, yeah, a lot of the map changes were overwhelming. There was a lot of maps. They were small and hard to read. Hopefully you've had time to review the draft plan and kind of zoom in and dig into those maps and read the recommendations in a little more detail, and this will all come together. Really, the map changes are tweaks to the maps that are required for any NPI, because we are ultimately updating with any neighborhood plan. We are updating the citywide plan, because this will override the citywide plan because it represents the current vision of the neighborhood. And so when we talk about growth, future growth in the neighborhoods, that will primarily occur in the mixed use and commercial places of near Northwest. And so we want to kind of take a step back and talk to you about those places, make sure that you understand the vision, the big picture, and the strategy at a high level. And then Sung has volunteered to have one-on-one meetings. If any of this is unclear, we can answer questions today. We can also have follow-up meetings with you all. So next slide. So the mixed use and commercial places of near Northwest generally fall into these categories. They include the major corridors, which are 38th Avenue, Federal Boulevard, and Spear Boulevard. We also have a lot of streetcar corridors. These are areas that are your walkable, cherished neighborhood nodes like 32nd, Tejon, and 44th. We also have larger mixed use areas like Diamond Hill, Water Street, and Jason Street, where a lot of redevelopment is already occurring, or the zoning is in place that allows larger mixed use development to occur. And so that is a strategy, just recognizing that there are kind of outside of the corridors, there are these other larger areas that anticipate to handle future growth as well. We also are just acknowledging that a lot of the area, even since Blueprint, Denver was defined in these areas, places like Platt Street, Central Street, 25th Avenue, a lot of these places have already redeveloped. They were listed as future growth areas, and they have already accommodated some of that growth. And so we are just acknowledging those areas as sort of redeveloping. Next slide. So one of the main ideas that we want everyone to understand, a big change from Blueprint Denver, and you can see in this map where we've highlighted a green area. This is basically the industrial area of Sunnyside, so right near Pecos and I-70. Blueprint Denver identified this as a future area for high intensity mixed use development. And so a main idea in this plan is to redistribute that large area into smaller areas along the major corridors where the community is comfortable with additional intensity, as well as in order to support transit-oriented development. So those pink dots that are on Federal and 38th, those are major transit stops for the buses. And as you know, those corridors are listed as future high capacity transit. So we know that they could be upgraded in the future. Federal Boulevard has already seen improvements. 38th is undergoing a plan to plan for future transit improvements. And so the infrastructure is getting there and could support that additional density. Also, you know, why we're doing this, the industrial jobs, through our conversations and research about growing jobs and protecting jobs, that industrial area provides about 1,000 jobs to the community. And they are important jobs because they are middle wage jobs. So you don't have to have a high degree to attain you know, $60,000 a year jobs there. And so supporting that infrastructure of jobs is important to the community. Also, like I said, supporting future transit investments. So we talked about that with these future bus corridors. And so putting more people where transit investments are occurring. And revitalizing those corridors. When we asked the community, a lot of people, number one in the surveys, supported additional density and growth along the corridors and also saw them as opportunities to improve the corridors. So, thinking about redeveloping more of the one-story auto-oriented commercial uses into a mix of uses that could include commercial places for and more residents within walking distance to more people. So next slide. We'll talk more about the industrial area and the focus area discussion as well. So we'll get into a little bit more detail about that. So as far as the major corridors go, really the vision is to create pedestrian oriented places with higher intensity development near busier bus stops, creating opportunities for preservation, neighborhood services, and missing middle housing. So these corridors are trying to do a lot for the neighborhoods because they are very long and go through different areas of the neighborhoods. They have different character within them. And so we're looking at that character, we're looking at preservation opportunities, and we're also looking at those green areas as opportunities to redevelop and grow. Next slide. So the strategies for major corridors, you can see on the graphic to the right, this kind of points out some of the key elements that we've developed for the plan for all of the major corridors. So 38th Avenue, Federal Boulevard, and Spear Boulevard, allowing taller heights and having ground floor active uses near bus stops to create more of a transit-rich environment, promoting human scale design. So making sure that any taller buildings step down, feel comfortable to walk by, have access to sunlight and transition to the neighborhood in a sensitive way. Pedestrian friendly frontages, limiting drive-throughs, having visually appealing design elements, and enhancing the streetscape of these areas. Also looking at adaptive reuse of existing residential structures, to preserve in those potentially historic areas, reusing some of those single family homes and that exist along like 38th and Federal, and potentially allowing them to convert to commercial uses. So something that used to be a single family home could support a restaurant in the future, for example, and there are some of those that already exist. And then adding missing middle. So we've talked about missing middle with you in the past, but those are, think townhomes, small apartment buildings, acknowledging that these corridors are long and we can't, it's not realistic to assume that you can have ground floor commercial along the entire length of the corridor. And so in the middle, in between the major bus stops and where we do have the commercial areas, filling in with missing middle is appropriate. Next slide. And then we have the streetcar corridors. So these are our cherished, beloved neighborhood nodes. The vision for these areas is to celebrate and preserve the significance of the streetcar corridors as they serve as neighborhood destinations and gathering places for the community, but also we have recommendations to improve and build upon these areas as well. Next slide. And so a similar graphic here, just showing the different scale of this, and that, if and when redevelopment does occur requiring active ground floors in new development, we've heard that that's a primary concern. We understand that there has been development and we have already lost some commercial, and the 100% residential products are going up, and that's not desired. So we're immediately looking for opportunities to address that. Also promoting adaptive reuse of existing residential structures, again, where it makes sense to expand commercial opportunities at a more affordable price point. So we know that new construction is expensive and sometimes unattainable to small businesses. So converting some existing businesses or buildings is important to help with that. So exploring tools to preserve character and continuation of neighborhood commercial serving districts. We also have some recommendations about celebrating the streetcar history. You have 11 miles of former streetcar in the near Northwest in these 4 neighborhoods, and that's significant. It may even, I mean, there's a lot in these neighborhoods compared to other neighborhoods in Denver. So it is a differentiator of these neighborhoods, and it's really important to celebrate that. We have an idea about bringing a neighborhood trolley tour as a micro transit solution that could replicate the streetcar route and help connect those dots, connecting people to the bus stops and the transit stops in the area, as well as even serving as perhaps a historic tour of the neighborhood. Next slide. And then finally, as I said, we have these larger mixed use areas. The vision for these areas identified in pink are to support well-established and new mixed use destinations by encouraging quality infill development and ground floor active uses. So these are areas that are currently redeveloping. These are the areas in the neighborhoods where you're seeing the cranes go up, you're seeing taller buildings already being constructed, and that's because the zoning is in place to support that. And so development is already occurring and will continue to occur, and that's just part of the story that we're telling. And then the dash pink area is just highlighting, like I said, the area like Platt Street and that just south of I-25, really along the river, that a lot of that area has already redeveloped. And so we're just acknowledging that we shouldn't assume that new growth can go there because we wouldn't anticipate any of those new buildings being torn down.
Kanye, I think Mike might have a clarifying question. And if any of you feel like you don't understand something, feel free to put your hand up if you need something clarified.
Yeah,
And we'll have time for more questions at the end of after the presentation of this first section is done. But if something's unclear, feel free to put your hand up.
mine was just more of a comment on this particular map. I missed the land use meeting, but Sung was very gracious to spend a little bit of time with me last week. I made some pretty extensive comments on the Conveo document and a lot of concerns that I had about the Jefferson Park map that's shown. But one of the things that I think relates to the slide is I think there is an opportunity on the southernmost edge of Jefferson Park for greater density. Some of the blocks on there are already built to a certain height or are already zoned for 3MX, or they're already surface parking lots. So shared a bunch of comments with Sung and also gave him a follow-up email and made some notes in that Conveo document. So I guess one thing I just wanted to kind of understand too is, particularly because I think that the land use probably got a lot of feedback from the committee members, and just how that's going to be incorporated in the document before it's shared with for public comment. Like I think there's a lot that needs to change on the Jefferson Park maps before we release a document that is out there for public comment. So.
No, thanks, Mike. Maybe a good plan would be for us, maybe we'll get through kind of presenting this comment. So maybe it gets us a little more all on the same page a little bit, like, and then maybe after, right before the discussion, we can maybe address that, how that feedback will be incorporated and answer any other clarifying questions. So maybe we'll try to get through the discussion. If anything's like confusing though, you can put your hand up, but we will have time for kind of questions and comments after Cheney finishes presenting kind of this first thing.
Awesome. Thank you for
Great.
letting me share that.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And I was circling down there, I think just for others you're talking about right across from Mile High, right? Where all the parking lots are.
Yeah, yes, that sort of that, not to get in the weeds, I know we can talk about it later, but sort of that 20th to 21st or 22nd area that's right along the south. You've got those sort of light green, dark green blocks. Those are already I think, 8 or 12. And, like directly across from the Turntable Studios, there's just like a warehouse now that's a CrossFit building. That property is already CMX 5, I think. And I think there's a discussion to be had, maybe where could that be larger? And what about the blocks that go westbound? It's currently the Urology Center, a service parking lot, maybe kind of a larger parking lot, but that's just an area that really kind of seemed to warrant a little bit more discussion and attention on.
Yep, okay. So I think that's it for this slide. Next slide. Okay, and so just what this all translates to is some map-based changes. As I said, we need to update Blueprint Denver. We need to update future places, growth strategy maps, new height map. This is all just part of the requirements for the neighborhood plan. And those are what we showed to you just to be, transparent and to hope, but I understand it's a lot to take in. And like Councilman said, we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, and you guys don't. So hopefully this kind of summary helps you understand the bigger vision about where growth is being directed and the reasoning behind that. Of course, the Conveo document, the draft steering committee plan, has a lot more detail that you can dive into, and we're happy to answer any questions now or in the future. Next slide, I think we have.
Yeah. And I can maybe address Mike's first question first before kind of, I guess, we move on to these general ones. So yeah, I think Mike is I think it's really kind of twofold in terms of the comments we've been incorporating. We've been addressing a vast majority of the specific comments and comments that you guys have been providing throughout this section. I think for the land use one, it's, for specific comments about, higher, lower, I think we'll all take that feedback and weigh it against kind of what we've been hearing from the community at large, from workshops, online surveys and such, and make our best call in terms of for this initial draft plan in like what we think we've heard from the community and try to balance all the different perspectives and voices. So we'll do our due diligence in fixing some of the specific, the mismatches, Mike, that we discussed. And then in terms of the policy decisions about like how big or tall in certain locations, I think we'll internally try to figure out how to best balance the different perspectives, but also it's an opportunity to put that back out into the community and see, if we got it right. And continue to have that conversation with the neighborhood.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I was going to ask real quick, kind of along the lines of, I see Councilwoman Sandoval had a comment there, but will the steering committee get to see changes that are made to the plan before it's released to the public? Or is the document that's released to the public, is that going to be new to us in terms of what you accepted or rejected from steering committee input?
I think for the most recent draft I sent you, I think I stated in my email, like 80% of the comments we're able to address, 20% of them we're still working through. So the vast majority should have seen kind of edits reflected based on those comments. For the land use one in particular, we'll try our best to get all the revisions incorporated, but I don't think we'll be able to have time to kind of have another review draft of the land use and bill form section, and we'll continue to kind of work through that as part of the public review draft.
I get that, and not to belabor the point, I guess what I'm suggesting or asking is that the steering committee at least get a chance to look at a document that's incorporated or rejected findings before we just see it and we're like, oh, here it is posted for public comment. I want to understand why something was accepted or rejected ahead of time, rather than, a follow-up conversation, because I could imagine the answer would be like, well, you know what, we've already released to the public now, so now we're just gonna wait and see what the public thinks. If that's the case, I mean, it seems like maybe the steering committee input might not be as valuable as we each think it is, but just an
Yeah.
opinion on my part, so.
I'm happy to provide that for the mobility, quality of life, and economy sections as soon as possible, because we have been keeping track of all those comments. But like I said, for the land use one might be tricky, just mainly from a timing perspective, but can also provide that spreadsheet after it's done and continue to have that conversation.
No, thank you for that, Mike. So I want to first just get any clarifying questions about, and not just focusing on the content that was presented today, not just everything in the plan. Was there anything about the content that was just presented that anybody needed clarified that was kind of didn't make sense to you?
I guess I'm struggling, Grace, with clarifying questions versus questioning content. Is there a difference that you're looking for? Because I've got
Yeah,
several questions on content.
Like content meaning that is it question about how someone came to a conclusion, or?
Well, I'm
Well, I'm
hoping we
just
haven't come to conclusions. And so that's, I guess, I'm kind of like Mike. I'm concerned that in the race to get this thing published, where the steering committee is being cut out of the ability to have a discussion with staff and consultants on big deal issues, land use and transportation. Those kinds of issues are big things. And to get rushed through that part and not be able to see that you're actually hearing us and that we're not having a dialogue about it, I'm really, really concerned about that.
Is there a recommendation or thought you would have for a change in the process?
Yeah, I would allow enough time to have review by us and the ability to have further discussion. Otherwise, you're publishing the whole thing and you're going to find, I'm afraid you're going to find a lot of us coming back and saying, well, we didn't agree with this. We're steering committee members, but we were cut out of the process at the end of the process, before the end of the process.
And is this?
But-
Oh, go ahead, Grace.
Right. So I think what we were thinking is we wanted to start by talking about kind of what we presented, which was the kind of more big picture ideas of land use, and get your feedback. And we asked you all to kind of think about either one thing you liked or one thing you wanted to improve. So kind of on that big picture piece, I know there is a lot of detail in the plan itself. And Sung, and I know that you can leave feedback in Cabello, but Sung, did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of the dialogue piece?
No, I was just gonna ask specifically if maybe there's, based on the revised Conveo document that was provided to you guys, and in reviewing the mobility section and quality of life section again, like were there specific things that were unresolved or unaddressed that you commented on that felt like was a pressing issue, or something that we overlooked? Because I mean, we have been working through those comments, and the most recent draft that we shared with you should have incorporated a lot of that feedback.
Yeah, so one example would be you're still showing a bike route on 32nd Avenue. I don't think that's realistic. I've suggested that you move it up to 33rd.
Yeah, no, and that's Tim,
It's
one
that
of
kind of
the
stuff.
remaining 20% that I'm still resolving. I'll get you the number right now, but I was working on resolving the remaining 12 to 15 comments on the mobility, and the 32nd Avenue is definitely one of them, about studying an alternative route on 33rd, and studying that. So yeah, I mean, I want to be transparent in terms of just providing the spreadsheet, in terms of, how we addressed and incorporate the feedback. But meanwhile, if you're not seeing that, I mean, please feel free to reach out to me, and we can have that conversation.
Yeah, in terms of what you've presented tonight, this whole concept that residential houses along significant corridors should be converted to commercial. I object to in the most absolute terms. And you've mapped it that way on 32nd. You're talking about it on Federal. That's destructive to the fabric of our neighborhood. It's a residential neighborhood with streetcar nodes, not streetcar corridors. Most of the corridors that you show on the map are residential streets that had streetcars running down them. And every third block or so, there's a commercial node. But expanding that and saying that whole stretch should be changed to commercial destroys our neighborhood. So, I mean, it's that kind of stuff that's popping up today that just has me really, really concerned about where you guys are headed.
So that might be just a misunderstanding and it's clarified in the
No,
document.
it's not a
and
misunderstanding. It's what you've stated. It's what you've shown graphically.
Oh my God.
You can go to the map of Highland, the 3D map that's a little bit later in the presentation. And I can point to what you're showing, but it's pretty outrageous, I think.
So the areas where we're recommending that are the areas that are designated local corridors. And so this is where it gets into that we have to pull up the places map. And Tim, I'm happy to, go through this with you in detail and look at the maps. It wouldn't be along the entire corridor that we're recommending transforming residential to commercial. It's opportunities within and nearest the former stops where the commercial places exist to make commercial more viable, acknowledging that a lot of the commercial has been lost and that's a concern for the neighborhood.
It's not true in Highland. You're talking about Henniston. It's not in Highland. We have not lost commercial. We have not replaced commercial with residential in Highland. It's a whole different neighborhood. So you're in the wrong mindset, I think. Our commercial is strong, it's vibrant, it's isolated in how long it is along our streets. The rest of it's still zoned residential. I think you guys are off the mark here, big time.
Does anyone else have
I have to agree.
thoughts
I've
on?
got to agree with Tim on this too. So I don't know how many other people are in the same mindset, but
Hi, this is Trupti. I think Tim highlighted something, which is that you guys might be taking a blanket approach here. And what I think what's true in Highlands and Jefferson Park may not be in Sunnyside, because there is a concern in Sunnyside about losing commercial and keeping some of those nodes, but that may not be true in Highlands. So maybe the issue is more that you're taking a blanket approach, and we may need to look at that specific aspect and take it neighborhood by neighborhood.
I see Tim nodding. Does you agree with what Trupti said about the blanket approach? That
Yeah, absolutely.
neighborhood by neighborhood.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure I'm kind of hearing from all the voices here. And so I'm appreciating hearing how we can improve the plan. We asked you guys to kind of look at these slides ahead of time and think about either something about these ideas that we've presented that you like, or a way to improve them. I thank you, Tim, for sharing your idea on how it could be improved. So I'd like to go around and kind of just touch base with each steering committee member on their thoughts on that. So I'm just going to go on my screen and I'll give you guys a head up. So I think Ashton is who I have first on my screen, and then I'll go to Lexi.
And Grace, one more time, you're asking me to comment specifically on the 3D rendering you have up on the screen now?
On
I
the
understood you
kind of the
correctly?
content that was presented so far, but if there's something else about the plan, you can touch on that as well.
Okay.
I just don't want to get too
well,
much, I guess, in the
Yeah,
the
that's
weeds,
fine.
but we will be talking about focus areas or be presenting kind of more detailed focus area.
Yeah, so like Mike and Tim who spoke, I mean, I have some specific comments, you know, in the neighborhood I know best, mine in Jefferson Park. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that sort of thing. You know, generally speaking, I generally agree with the big picture that we've been talking about. So I don't have anything, you know, from a big picture standpoint to contribute.
Okay. And then Lexi, in terms of the big picture ideas, I guess, maybe what, is there anything you see as a strength with the big picture ideas or concerns you have about it?
Hi, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far, really. I think the idea that we have just kind of very different neighborhoods in this area plan is, you know, is really going to come into play with land use. I mean, transportation obviously is one thing too, but like the land use and where the density is going and where the commercial is going is just so different throughout all the neighborhoods. I mean, we all know that. So like Highland is good, but Chaffee Park and Sunnyside could use some more, and Jefferson Park is pretty dense already, but you know, maybe they want some more commercial. I mean, I think the idea of the main corridors like Spear, 38th and Federal. I mean, I think those, you know, there is residential there and people will be affected, but like those are busy roads. That's generally where I think a lot of some of this stuff should go. I think the streetcar nodes are important, but I agree with Tim. Like it's hard to create these corridors. You know, I think, you know, in general, we need to solve a problem. And I think there are going to be people that are unhappy with certain things, obviously. But I think, I do think this needs to be looked at more closely. I think I do feel a little rushed. I feel like I unfortunately couldn't make it to that last minute meeting. I wish I could have. I think a lot of people wish they could have. It would be nice to be talking through this all in person and looking at maps, and it's just it's a lot. And I feel like we don't want to set ourselves up for something in the future where, you know, we didn't pay enough attention or we moved too quickly.
So more time to talk about kind of specifically how these big ideas are implemented in the neighborhood, in the neighborhoods. That's
Yeah,
kind
I mean, I think I just agree in general with all the statements that I feel like we leave these comments and then it's kind of like, are we going to be able to talk through any, you know, how they were incorporated and all of that. So I think that's kind of, I just agree with everybody.
no, thank you for that.
Would it be helpful
Okay.
for me to follow up in the next few days with the spreadsheet and how comments were addressed or not addressed, and then kind of highlights of changes? Because I really want to kind of reiterate the fact that, you know, all comments were reviewed, and I would say 95% of them were directly incorporated. So except for Tim, the one specific one about 30-second that I did today that I did have the discussion with other kind of partner agencies on, I'm happy to do that if that provides more reassurance. And then for the land use one in particular, we still need to sit with the document and review it all together. We haven't had a chance to thoroughly review that since we just exported that file. But if it helps to have a maybe office hour for individual steering committee members that are really passionate about specific land use, we can try to do that, schedule those as well. So I guess I'm just trying to say, I'm trying to come up with ideas to be flexible and kind of respond to specific concerns that the committee members have identified.
I think that helps. I guess my comment would be on, you know, if you say you're accepting 95% of the comments that all of us have made on the Conveo documents, I would want to know what the 5% is that wasn't accepted. And if it's something that one of us feels really passionately about,
Okay.
I want to have a dialogue about, well, why did that, you know, suggestion not resonate, or what pushed back against that to have a steering committee opinion, you know, be overruled because, I don't know, one neighbor that lived on the block next door didn't agree with something. So.
Yeah.
Sung, are you saying that those aren't accepted or that you just haven't gotten to them in the understanding of the 5 to 20?
The 20% you're talking about that I mentioned?
Yeah,
The 20% is the ones that I haven't gotten to yet. But
Right.
I mean, generally to, we were incorporating they were helpful feedback in terms of, like substantive changes, and then also kind of working through specific ideas and the organization of the content. So it just required a bit more time than originally anticipated to do that. Going through this iterative process, but yeah, I mean, the other kind of policy ideas that I'm talking about are things we've heard, and we heard one side and the other, so we're still trying to figure out how to best kind of balance different perspective on certain topics. But
right.
yeah.
Can I jump in, Grace, just for like my little bit? Is that okay?
Sure, yeah, I'll use this this will be your.
You
going
can
around,
skip
because I
me.
do know, I think as usual, have it a little behind, and I know that in the next section, we're talking about the focus area, so I think that might be helpful for some people who haven't maybe gone into the plan as much detail to see that. But go ahead, yeah.
Okay, I think in terms of big picture, I think we really have to keep in mind that like these are suggestions and things that we're not going to wake up one morning and this plan is going to be here and be implemented. It takes time, it's slow, it's a process. And like I don't think like we're going to implement, say this plan happens and then tomorrow, all of the homes on Federal are gone, or all of the homes on 44th are gone. I think we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about it. I also really have been a little frustrated with how we're communicating with each other. I think we could do a better job of not interrupting, maybe being a little bit more like accommodating to how hard people are working, how hard we're working as volunteers, and how hard the people who are being paid are working to do this too. I just think we could move forward better with finding friction that allows us to move forward instead of friction that kind of we dig into our own like specific things. I know that's not to land use, but I think it's come up a lot in land use, probably because it's such a pinpoint or like maybe pain point issue for a lot of people. But I just big picture how we are expressing what we need has left me feeling a little bit uneasy and maybe not as respectful as I would like to see this process go. Yeah, I've been thinking about that since last time. Like we're all giving up a lot of time to do this on both sides. And I don't even want to, it's feeling to me like it is becoming a two-sided situation and not a joint effort. And I think we need to focus on making it more of a joint process, and working together is that's my big picture thought of the process.
No, thank you for sharing that, Emily. Yeah, just having more dialogue and have the tone of it being kind of more respectful is what I'm hearing you say. No, thank you so much. And I know a lot of you are wanting to go into detail. I think Sung had offered the idea of like, if you have kind of more detail right now, maybe because of time, we'll focus on just feedback on the big picture ideas for as we go around and share what we like and what we see in there, and then what we need to improve. And then maybe the more detailed feedback can be put in Conveo, or we can dialogue with Sung about any questions you have kind of about the more detailed plan, and Sung, you can send out how that was resolved in the plan, maybe is the best way to do that in consideration of kind of getting to the other things on our agenda today. And so maybe I'll continue to go around to the group because I want to make sure I kind of hear from everyone. Renee, I see you have your hand up, and if you wanted to share what you felt like needed to be improved or what you liked about the plan, you could do that now. And if you had another question too with that, feel free to put that in there.
Sure. So one of the things I really liked about the plan is breaking down the major corridors for the intent of creating a more pedestrian oriented environment in place. I think that's absolutely needed. These corridors are unsafe, they're hard to cross, and cars are they're a major factor. One of my concerns though is that our vision is creating pedestrian oriented places near busier bus stops. And I just feel like bus stops come and go. And the street grid that's so important to where pedestrians do travel is more of the infrastructure and the bones that should guide where we're suggesting intensity increase. And so I'd like the intent, but I feel like I'm not sure I understand why we're using bus stops as the framework. It should be like major north-south streets that lead to parks and schools, or east-west streets that lead to places we're going to have housing. And, you know, is it based on that? Is it based on property size? That's one of my thoughts. And on the streetcar topic, I do like and want this plan to acknowledge the unique, like the specialness of those that you feel when you're on those streets. But I think, again, the way that we get there probably needs to be a little more fine-tuned. And I think one of the reasons that's losing its strongness and it's not communicating well is growth areas are still just these along the corridors. And I think we need growth areas to be shown along 44th, along Tejon, so that we know that there's also growth being channeled, not just on Federal 38 and over by Diamond Hill. So I don't know if we're getting to that, but I did comment in the document, and I have verbally in the last one said, like, major growth areas are too limited. They're too like large grain in this plan. And I think that would help strengthen some of the things that we're trying to accomplish with major corridors and streetcars. That would be, I do have, you don't have to answer it now, but I'm disappointed that was not incorporated. Unless I just missed it altogether. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you, Renee. Cheney, did you want to respond or Sung to, like, in terms of like whether or not Renee was missing something in regards for how the growth was distributed?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the thing is that the way Blueprint sets up like what it identify as a growth strategy. I think sometimes it's hard to actually. Renee, point well taken. And I think the land use kind of summary map that we're trying to still create that helps summarize the key recommendations about growth and design is something that we can use to address it. I think the way Blueprint categorizes future growth areas sometimes don't really represent it well at a neighborhood level. So I think we can kind of through the height map adjustments and then also through more of the summary map that we're planning to create for the land use section, we can get at that a little bit better.
So I mean, accept that answer, but this being a neighborhood plan,
Right.
we cannot show where growth areas are to be expected in this plan because of the framework that Blueprint sets up for us.
No, I think we could show it. I think we can use kind of the neighborhood summary map to kind of get at that a little bit better than relying purely on Blueprint.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think we could,
Thank you.
I totally agree, Renee. It is, basically when we talk about the future growth areas, it's mixed use and commercial places. And it's the missing middle recommendations and you know, the housing. So Sung, I'm just thinking, you know, I wonder if this plan could in the future growth map, I mean, we could highlight differently than Blueprint and highlight the high and high medium residential areas as well, because those really are also locations where additional growth will be directed.
Yeah, I think something to pair it with that, would be helpful to better communicate these ideas and concepts.
So I want to continue to touch base with some of the folks we haven't heard from. I think I'm seeing in the chat some ideas for how to give that more detailed feedback. And I don't know, Sung, if you want to kind of reflect on that, and we could follow up after the meeting. Because I know you'd mentioned potentially like putting together that kind of spreadsheet or of how ideas are addressed. So
Yeah.
some ideas for a meeting, but I know you might probably need to think about that. But so right now we'll just focus on maybe going around the group and getting more feedback on this big ideas before we kind of move on to the rest. Does that sound like? a
Yeah,
good
no,
plan?
no, wheels are turning in my brain to figure
Yeah.
out the process solution here. So I do want to be responsive, and I'm just trying to think and build into a schedule that makes sense. But for now, what I'm thinking is I can provide you guys the spreadsheets of how we've been tracking it, and then try to potentially have a follow-up meeting, like I think someone suggested in the chat, by neighborhood, to discuss specific topics with a focus on land use, and get together on that. So I'm just trying to kind of map out logistically what that might look like, but I can follow up with an email or on what that might look like. So but if I send out an invite and you said yes, you have to show up. So that's the only requirement. But yeah, I'll try to think of something.
No, thank you, Sung. So I'm gonna touch base with Lorenzo and then Jamie. Just to hear your thoughts on kind of the big picture idea, if there were things you liked about it or things that you were concerned about in terms of kind of the big
Sure.
picture approach.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the work that's been gone into doing the visuals, because I'm trying to place, especially within my neighborhood, within the Highlands neighborhood, kind of place myself there visually with the new proposed changes or development possibilities. And so thank you for that. And also my concern also, if I've heard it from brought up a few times, is the potential elimination of some of the resident housing in some of the areas, because it will change the neighborhood quite a bit. And so that is a concern of mine. And also, I think another comment I heard was that, each neighborhood is so unique as far as, the development that has taken place or is proposed to take place. So I think breaking it up specifically to each neighborhood would be a good way to move forward as well. I live in the Highlands, so we've had a lot of development around commercial development, and then of course Tejon is right a few blocks from where I'm at, so I'm very concerned about the development there. It's happening, but at the same time, I just want to make sure that we keep that balance as well. So yeah, so I just think just kind of really focusing on each particular neighborhood separately. I get the big picture, but I think separately we have our own unique issues and own unique ideas. So maybe kind of breaking that up a little bit would be helpful.
Thank you, Lorenzo. So I hear you kind of reiterating like
Yeah, I know.
the importance for maybe finding a way to gather feedback.
Absolutely.
And so, and the next section, we're going to go through and kind of just try to help you better understand what the different neighborhoods might look like, but and maybe then the input on those different neighborhoods will have to figure out a different context for doing that, because I don't think that we'll have time to go in that detail today, but we can figure out how we can do that.
Okay.
But thank you, Lorenzo. And then I think Jamie next.
Hi. I think I'm going to be able to have a better input once we start getting down to more detailed stuff, because my main concerns are the physical visual changes to the community in regards to how high buildings are. And again, I do want to go back and speak to about, like, we're talking about moving houses or whatever that position was. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that. Again, the height of buildings, it's imperative to me that we do not block the sun from any angle. And then, but my biggest concern is when we start looking at these commercial spaces, regardless of where they're at, because we know they're going to be along the main corridors. That just makes sense. we're not imposing on actual neighborhood blocks. And how are we getting the original members of the north side to prosper from all of this growth? So those are just my main concerns. And I feel like those are just, right now, we're still on big topic stuff. And I'm more concerned about when we get down to the nitty gritty.
Thank you for that, Jamie. Then so I'm hearing more concerns about kind of the heights of building and maybe the adaptive reuse piece and how that looks if the houses.
Yeah, and then,
So I'm here.
and Jamie,
Go
I
ahead.
know it's, I mean, in some ways, we are getting down to the nitty gritty by sharing the document. So if that feels overwhelming, I'm also happy to sit down and go through maybe some of the more relevant kind of recommendations for your neighborhood, like we've been discussing, if that's more helpful to maybe just kind of easily communicate kind of what we're trying to speak to about heights and those kind of things that you're particularly interested in about.
I mean, yeah, that's fine. We still just keep talking about like main corridors, and we mention main corridors and we mention the same stuff every week, and I get all of that. But I want to, this, when it starts happening, as things are happening, it's going to go quickly. And I don't want to miss all of that. And
Right.
so that's where my mind is. I'm like, it's all very overwhelming for somebody such as myself. And so to me, you're saying it is nitty gritty. It's nitty gritty for you, but to me, it's still very big picture. And so, yeah, that's just how I feel.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Sung, for offering to kind of walk through that. So I want to get to Nola, who hasn't spoken, and then Trupti. So Nola and then Trupti. So kind of sharing feedback, just kind of on focused on the big picture. I know a lot of people's minds are on kind of specific things, but we'll get through this and then we'll kind of have an overview of the some neighborhood information. Go ahead, Nola, I'm sorry.
I would just say I would like to talk specifically about Chaffee Park, and I have a lot of things to say about that, but I don't want to spend all this time if we're going to do separate meetings about separate neighborhoods. But I do feel like I do feel the need to talk in more detail about Chaffee Park specifically. And then overall, I guess my concerns are more about the interconnections between changing land use and speculation and price increases overall in the neighborhood. And so I guess I'd just like to have more of a nuanced conversation about that. So those are the pieces that I'm more interested in, and I'm still very, I feel like it's in there a little bit, but I guess I'm not totally sure of like ensuring that there's still home ownership, affordable home ownership opportunities and in this area, in these areas of growth, that's kind of part of the picture. So those are my thoughts now. Thanks.
No, thank you, Nola. So in changing land use, making sure affordability, how does that impact affordability is your concern? And yeah, and I don't know if you want to speak to that or point to anywhere in the plan, that would be good to look at in terms of that piece of it. Jamie or Sung, do you have thoughts on, like, in terms of the affordability piece, which I know we discussed at the.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, we do have the affordable housing policies about any kind of new construction, affordable housing and what we would prioritize. And those would, yeah, definitely be specifically tied to those kind of higher intensity growth areas. But yeah, I think I can probably read a little bit more detail on maybe what NOLA has written up in Conveo too. But yeah, appreciate that comment.
And Trupti, if you wanted to share, you said you had, and I saw in your comments, you had a big picture question too. But yeah, if you have any feedback about the big picture ideas, and feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, I think specifically, I mean, I agree with what a lot of folks are saying, kind of the need to dive in, do it at the neighborhood level. Things are different. But can we go to page 9? I think it's page 9 in the presentation, because I have a question on the way we're moving. Let's see, I'll tell you. The one with the dots going out from the industrial area as the major transportation, that one right here. So my question is, you know, we have this huge investment that the citizens made with Fox and the light rail stop, and that this whole area was kind of an area of change. And now through this process, we've determined that we want to keep the industrial, whereas I think that was what Blueprint may have been changing, is move away from industrial. So now we decided we're keeping industrial because of the jobs. And now we're saying we're moving the transportation corridors to these little other areas instead of 41st and Fox, because that was, to me, that was kind of the impetus and growth from that particular light rail stop. And now we're saying, oh, let's focus on BRT now, because now BRT is coming, so we're moving away. If you can just kind of clarify for me, kind of what is changing in the way we're outlining these different transportation hubs. Just clarification, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Trupti. So the area in the dashed line up in the northwest corner, that's the more industrial area. The area around 41st and Fox is lower down, and that's kind of the current mixed use areas that we talked about. That's where redevelopment is already occurring. And so the dark green area that's dashed outline, that's the current industrial uses. Yes, Blueprint's vision was to relocate, and then this would redevelop. Now we're taking a different approach, and instead that growth is being redistributed into those pink circles along the transit routes. We are still anticipating and supporting the mixed use development, higher intensity development at 41st and Fox, like particularly along Jason Street. That was a vision from the community as well. That was really one of the biggest consensus items in one of the surveys where we asked. A lot of people said that 41st and Fox just makes a lot of sense because the light rail station's there. And so sorry if that was confusing, but yeah, it is a transit stop. It is anticipated to continue to see, more of the redevelopment. We, as well as preservation of existing businesses along Jason. We'll talk about that in the focus areas too, a little bit more.
Great, thank you.
Trupti, did you want to add anything in terms of something you see that you like about the big picture or something you're concerned about?
I'm still kind of digesting all of this. And to the points other people made, every time we have this meeting, there's so much new stuff. And then we're like, hey, take a quick look, we're moving on. And then it's going to go to the, we need to slow down. And I think land use is the part that I think gets most people excited, good or bad. And we probably should not rush through that. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, Trupti. Bill, I see your hand up, and then if you also want to touch on your if any things you saw about the big picture you liked or were concerned about, and you can also, if you had a question as well.
Yep. So I agree with the comments relative to the need for some discussions that are targeted in the neighborhoods specifically, so that we don't get strategies that are go across all 4 neighborhoods. I agree and really like a lot of the added density. I think density is a good thing, not a bad thing. It helps form a robust economy, and I think it's been thought through and organized well. The only real concern I have has to do with this slide that Trupti asked to come up, and that is there's been a lot of dialogue because of the focus group for Sunnyside. There have been some differing opinions, and I think different people have heard different things. I do not believe that what we've heard and where we should go is that we're redistributing growth from this area into the nodes. I think we need the growth in the nodes. I just don't think it has to be redistributed from this area. To me, my takeaway from the discussion regarding this area is that it's a hard one to call. We don't want to lock in too closely to how it gets zoned because we don't know what the market conditions are going to be. And yes, some of those 1,000 jobs are very valuable, but frankly, half of them are, and half of the best paying ones, the best paying ones are Dawn Foods. So you can't whitewash that area either as being, you know, a gold mine for jobs. So thanks.
Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Maybe if you're feeling in agreement, you could do like a thumbs up, or if you have a concern, or if you have a different thought on it, you could raise a hand.
Thanks, Bill. I was kind of thinking something similar in terms of, I don't remember this as the solution to this area. I thought we heard things like, we want mixed use in this area. And now we're kind of saying, you know, we don't necessarily want that.
I think it's been difficult because there's been a lot of different opinions. There were a lot of different breakout groups. So to some degree, you could hear different things and take different things away from the dialogue.
Yeah,
it's a difficult area to call for a lot of different reasons.
Right,
Who
and
knows
just to
where it's gonna go?
clarify, for that specific area, the western portion was identified for preservation. The other areas were identified as something that can transition over time. And if you look at some of the focus area recommendations, we talk about how we allow for that flexibility and transition to other uses as well. So I don't think, you know, we're intending to say that no growth will happen in that green area. We're just saying that, you know, when Blueprint called for it, it was basically saying that everything should be a mixed use development. And we're saying we're kind of placing in a little bit more guidance in terms of the mix of uses and how it transitions into a more mixed use industrial place over time. So just wanted to.
I hear what you're saying, Sung. That's exactly what I heard. I just don't, that's why I don't think the idea of redistributing from
Right.
here to the nodes is a critical element. I think the nodes stand on their own merit as places for growth.
Right, okay.
Thank you, Bill, for that feedback. So I think, Mike, you kind of spoke earlier, but did you have anything you wanted to add in terms of concerns or things that you want to make, you saw that were strengths and you think we should make sure, kind of just to share that? So, and then for after that, after Mike, I think if I didn't miss anybody, I think Leslie just joined us. We'll move on to the focus areas.
Yeah, and it might, oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I don't have anything further to add on this topic. I'll wait. I have some thoughts on the focus area for Jefferson Park that I can share when you guys get to that slide.
Okay, great. If it helps, Grace, do you want to have a 5-minute break just to let people?
Yeah, I think maybe it'll be good to help people process. So maybe take 5 minutes, come back at 7:15. And turn your camera on when you come back so we know you're back with us, and then we'll present the focus area content.
So is this meeting over with?
We're taking a quick break and resuming at 7:15 or so.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. It's 7:15. So I'm gonna, if you're back, turn your camera on. And then I know probably for the interest of time, Cheney, whenever you feel ready to kind of move into the focus areas. Okay. All right. So within the neighborhood plan, we have focus areas and transformative projects. This is where we dive into a little bit deeper detail in some of these areas, including Sunnyside Industrial Area. So they include focus areas are included one per neighborhood. And so next slide, we'll just start with kind of moving north to south. Oh, yeah. This slide is just the purpose of these is to provide additional attention, guidance. I kind of just said that. Our question to you to think about is, are these concepts clear and connecting the different plan recommendations? So what these focus areas do is try to visualize some of the key recommendations, and we bring those together in the plan in the neighborhood section. Next slide. So Chaffee Park focus area is the location located around Pecos and I-70. And this visualization, again, is just a high level concept, but it's based on the big idea in Chaffee Park. What we heard from residents is they really want a walkable neighborhood center or town square sort of feeling, and they feel like the other neighborhoods kind of have that already, and they could benefit from one as well. And so this area is already commercial. It's more of an auto-oriented commercial center, and so this shows a vision of that area transforming, how it could transform in the future into a more walkable mixed-use center. So the pink buildings being a vision of how new development could bring more activity to the area, and then transitioning to the neighborhood with additional residential types and uses. And then it kind of also brings together all of the key mobility improvements in the area. So you'll see like the key mobility streets of 48th Avenue and Pecos Street and the near Northwest Loop coming through. Also acknowledging that we need to maintain some freight routes to the existing industrial area. And improving gateways, really trying to create a sense of arrival into Chaffee Park and providing those services that the neighborhood is asking for, as well as transit and mobility improvements. And we'll just walk through these neighborhood by neighborhood and then have the discussion. So the Sunnyside focus area, which we've been talking a lot about tonight, the vision here is, and this is where we do get into more of the detail about, this idea of the innovation district that's been talked about
in the industrial area. So the light purple is sort of representing how some of the existing uses and buildings could contribute to the innovation district. There's a lot of businesses in this area that are food related, beverage, food and beverage related. And so we have this concept of really building an innovation district that's focused around food and beverage and other jobs, you know, that could fit into that. And we have recommendations around like creating the Sunnyside Innovation District Business Coalition to focus on building that branding for the area and really, you know, moving this forward through community and business support. The future innovation district. So to Bill's concern, you know, there we do talk about the potential to build up the innovation district with potential for new development. So a lot of these uses are like storage yards and things that aren't necessarily contributing a lot of jobs or innovation today. And so those might be areas that could redevelop, with the priority being that redevelopment would contribute to the innovation district with jobs in the same realm. Also protecting longstanding businesses and supporting them to allow them to stay in the area if they desire. And then that's kind of all the purple and gray areas. And then kind of the larger redevelopment, the kind of reddish color that you see in the back, like acknowledging that Fox Park redevelopment is just across the railroad tracks, talking about 41st and Fox and that vision of that area really becoming, you know, continuing to grow residential along the railroad tracks and Jason Street transforming. We also talked about 46th and Pecos as an opportunity to create a mixed use destination and focus around that core area, creating again a gateway at 46th and Pecos. And the transformative projects in all of these are in yellow. And so the transformative project here is a community serving use. We've talked about the redevelopment or expansion at Atzland Rec Center to serve the neighborhood, and then adding green space. Number 4 is you know, making sure that redevelopment also contributes much needed park space in the area to address the added residential density. Let's move on. Highland focus area is the area around the Triangle Viking Park, Federal Boulevard, 29th and Spear. That was a major, and then North High, the whole campus, like that was early on in the process. We identified that area as a major barrier to pedestrian movement connecting Highland to Jefferson Park. And so this is talking about the potential to kind of bring through connectivity through the North High campus. We've got the Near Northwest Loop shown going through here, improvements to Viking Park and Spear Boulevard to really improve the connection for students that walk to school and use the transit in the area, just to make that more pedestrian friendly. Key mobility streets, so Federal Boulevard, 29th, 32nd and Zuni are all listed as well. Preserving in the gray, kind of in the back, is 32nd Avenue. So preserving that corridor, the former streetcar corridor, as we've already discussed. And then the red, the mixed use community center along Spear Boulevard, really allowing those areas to transform into these mixed use centers, again, to provide more of that walkable destinations and mix of uses within walking distance that's located near those transit hubs. And then Jefferson Park focus area is, really focused around the kind of the Bridge Diamond Hill area and both sides of I-25 where the museums are today. So creating a walkable mixed use destinations in those areas. Higher intensity development is already allowed and anticipated in those areas already happening. So this is just a vision to kind of visualize that for the neighborhoods, talk about in the Diamond Hill, really connecting using the number 6 there, a park that could have an overlook of downtown, connect to the trail system. It also shows the Near Northwest Trail coming through, the Riverfront Park activation, connectivity, and connections, and then transitions to the neighborhood. And the transformative project in this case for Jefferson Park is a future bike pedestrian bridge over I-25 that would connect Jefferson Park to the river. So this is just to reiterate, kind of start discussion around the questions, and hopefully this gives you a little bit better idea about some of these focus areas and how the recommendations come together, and just allowing you to visualize the potential. But just to reiterate, the visualizations are completely conceptual and really intended to convey the vision and not necessarily development proposal.
So for here, I think that, what we've discussed, maybe having a different venue for specific feedback on the specific neighborhoods. But mainly, I think what we could focus on just here is if anyone had any kind of like did what Cheney kind of just presented make sense? Is there anything that you guys need clarified? Just so when you do look at the plan, like we can help you understand anything that was unclear. Is there anything that didn't make sense in terms of how it connected with the bigger concept ideas, or just confusing in general about these focus areas? And you could just raise your hand if you had a question. So I'm not seeing any hands up. Sung, does that make sense? Then we'll just kind of, Emily, go ahead. Emily and Mike.
Tim, do you want to go first? You had your hand up before I did.
I had 2 questions or comments, I guess, suggestions on the island map. One is extending the view of this further to the east, so that you pick up the rest of the area south of 29th, north of Spear, and west of Zuni Street, because that's a ripe area for redevelopment, and there are buildings already planned that don't show up here yet. And then the other one, and I'm beating a dead horse, but your number 6 up on 32nd Avenue, having all the houses along there shown as something to be adapted. Just want to raise my hand and say, please no.
Thank you for that feedback, Tim. And then we'll do Emily and then Mike.
For Chafee Park, was this the only area that you looked at for specifics? Was there any talk about like the federal side of Chafee Park, or even the center where the park is?
Sung or Cheney, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so Federal Boulevard is also, there are recommendations in there. When we started to look at that area of Federal, there's a couple issues. Number one is, the other side of Federal is in a different neighborhood. And so there certainly are recommendations around Federal Boulevard. We chose this as the area to focus the visualization because it was more central and there was more opportunity, and there was already land zoned for mixed use and commercial. Also along Federal, the opportunity sites, a lot of them are already proposed and include more of the auto-oriented uses that are today. In fact, though, that is something that Sung's going to talk about later today is a quick win for the plan is rezoning that area from community quarter, I think it is, Sung, to mixed use as a quick win for the plan. So I think you'll be pleased to hear that, Emily, but that'll be a little later and Sung will explain that.
Thanks, Janie, and thank you, Emily. Mike, did you want to ask your question or comment?
Yeah, obviously I'm in the Jefferson Park neighborhood. I'm gonna go to that slide. I actually did do my homework before this meeting. I have a list of 11 things on this particular slide. I don't know that it's really productive to go through each one of them on here. I don't know if Ashton or Kate have comments, but I guess my general comment would be, I'm not going to bore the group with a half hour of comments about this particular slide, but how would you like us in all 4 neighborhoods to get comments on these slides back to you so that you can make adjustments before they're shared with the public?
I mean, I think the
Good, Sung.
most, the best way is the Conveo document for direct comments, if you want to elaborate in detail. And then kind of we can think through more of a, again, the process solution of how we can meet to discuss kind of specific comments. But yeah, I guess the short answer is the Conveo document, Mike.
So the only thing is that this, I don't think this particular, or these PowerPoint slides are directly in the Conveo document. I mean, I think this is maybe, or is it maybe? I don't know.
It's in the neighborhood sections.
Okay. So if we go in, like the 11 comments I have, if I go into this document and I make them in Conveo, how do I understand what's accepted or rejected in the next phase before this is shared more broadly?
Again, I think that's kind of what I need to think through. Comments for this particular section. I think the quicker you're able to provide, the quicker we're able to potentially adjust. So if it's yeah, I mean, I have to kind of think through that. Mike, sorry not to give you a great answer, but I'm just trying to think through the timing of things of how to
it's okay.
best
I know
respond
it's
to
complicated.
feedback.
I just want to reiterate, I think Emily had said earlier, I know you guys are doing a fantastic job on this, and I know it's really difficult to try to weigh a lot of different opinions about a lot of different things and try to balance them out. I just really want to make sure that the input that the steering committee is giving to you guys is actually making it through to final recommendations. And I'm
right
happy to spend more time outside of these monthly meetings. And I think Ashton and Kate probably would too for Jefferson Park, but just, I have a lot of input on this, but I also want to know that if I mark up the Conveo document, that most of those things make it to the final public document, or if not, we can have a conversation that says, we didn't accept this point that you felt very strongly about because of A, B, and C, and give us a chance to sort of negotiate our position on that.
Right. Yeah. And I do just want to reiterate the fact that, I know you said the word final, but it is not, nothing's final. We'll go through several iterations with the community as well. So I don't want it to come off like just because, something slips through cracks, or maybe there needs to be more discussion and we're not incorporating as part of the first public review draft that it's a done deal. It's definitely not. I mean, all our public review drafts have continued to evolve through public feedback and comment. So I don't want it to make it feel like this is a high pressure situation where everything, nothing should change after this initial draft because things will change and evolve. Right, but I get you, I hear you out, Mike, that like you're more concerned about like what are the comments that we're rejecting or not rejecting, but not incorporating as part of this review draft versus the
Yeah.
ones that, will.
Yeah,
been
totally. And I also feel like, I've spent a lot of time comparing the current zoning for the Jefferson Park area with the map. So I think your first pass on the maps for Jefferson Park, I think you got halfway there, but I think it needs a lot of cleanup before you put a document in front of the public and then hope that the public figures out, what might need to be changed at that point. So
Right.
I'll just pause there. I know I probably
No,
said
thank
more than I
Thank you,
usually
Mike.
say at these meetings, but this is a passionate area for me. So thank you.
No, thank you, Mike, for sharing. And I see other people in the comments commenting about kind of just the need for discussion and further discussion. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe we'll go to Leslie and then hopefully we're helping clarify kind of the content of this, and we'll revisit how we kind of get that more detailed feedback about the neighborhoods. But then we'll take Leslie and then we're going to move on to just talking about our approach for kind of engaging the community in conversations about what should be prioritized next. So Leslie, if you want to share your comment, then we'll move on to that.
Hi, thank you. So in these plans where we have concepts of new commercial districts and walkable areas, perfectly understandable. I want to go back to what Cheney said about supports for existing businesses, because what this will naturally do is bring businesses off federal that I'm concerned about, but with the understanding that federal is not the most walkable, enjoyable place to hang out. So I'm not hating on those off federal commercial districts at all, but I'm just wondering what the supports are for existing businesses on the commercial corridor.
Sir,
Yeah.
oh, Jenny, go ahead.
That's so Leslie, that was discussed at a previous steering committee meeting when we focused on economy and housing. And so you'll find, I don't know them off the top of my head, but all of those business support recommendations are in that chapter of economy and housing. And you have now the full steering committee draft on Conveo. So I'd have to look through it to tell you exactly like which recommendation to go look at, but that would be the general area of the plan.
Yeah, there's a specific section for the local business recommendations.
Thank you.
Problem.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay. Let that, and then Sung, did you want to then move on
Yeah.
to speak to?
Yeah, I could keep moving on. I might just cover maybe the first half. I think the latter half is also maybe getting to the whole point about the neighborhood discussion stuff. So I'll try to cover what I can and then try to leave time at the end for next steps and then community for those that want to speak up from the public, general public. So we heard you guys loud and clearly towards the end of the last two meetings about how we start to think about prioritizing and implementing recommendations. So we wanted to go over kind of an approach to how we may start working with the community in this next round of engagement to start thinking about priorities, and then a little bit about how that would inform future work. So just kind of looking kind of at next steps beyond just the draft plan phase. So there's a lot of recommendations, as you guys know, as you've been reviewing them. So we were trying to think about, okay, if we're approaching the community and asking them to help us prioritize specific policies and recommendations, what do we need to do? So some of the key goals that we've identified was just to, keep it simple, focused, and easy to engage so that we're not making it feel like you need to know everything in order to have a voice in this conversation. So at a high level, the approach that we came up with is to present some of the major plan goals that we've summarized through the executive summary. So that's available in the introduction of the plan. So these major plan goals actually kind of are have been built and continued from our phase 2, where we identified specific focus topics that we identified early on in the process that we believe to be very kind of high priority for the community. So those are the major plan goals, and the idea is to under each goal list the most relevant kind of policies that help advance each goal, and then ask participants and community members to either choose or rank the top policies that they would like to see advance or prioritize first, just to get an understanding of where the community stands in terms of how they want to see things advance over time. So just as an example, how we're kind of structuring this and kind of planning this out is that these are some of the major plan goals. Again, more details provided in the introduction that helps kind of summarize all the key recommendations and priorities that we believe to hear from the community. So the first one being, and these are not ranked by importance or anything like that, but support and enhance neighborhood businesses and districts. So there are a lot of numerous recommendations about celebrating and preserving these areas physically, also connecting and developing new programs to support these businesses and such. So all of these different plan goals speak to multiple plan recommendations that across multiple topics. The second one being about affordable housing and how we think about housing options, improving placemaking, which includes policies about design, preservation again, and then how we can better celebrate the community, and then more. So we'll just go through a quick example for the first one about supporting and enhance neighborhood business and districts. So really what we plan to do again is to talk about these plan goals, describe them what they are, and then underneath include maybe 3 to 5 some of the most relevant area-wide recommendations that would advance these policies, and then ask people, what is it that you would want to prioritize in the recommendations of the draft plan that you want to see first. So this helps us kind of understand priorities and what people want to see, and it helps us kind of determine, which ones can we start prioritizing more and devote more resources to kind of down the line. So that's the high level kind of approach of what we're anticipating that's kind of unique to this next round of engagement in terms of helping working with the community to identify and help us prioritize specific recommendations. So Grace, I'll turn it over to you, but for the discussion question. But
so, Sung was just trying to present how we're thinking about going about engaging the community in this kind of talk about prioritization. Kind of in the thinking about the example he gave, do you guys feel like the way we're approaching them, is that sound simple enough? Does it seem like a way that would be engaging? And if not, how could we improve it? Is kind of what we're wanting to hear from you guys a little bit. So, and you can take a little minute to think about what you think. Leslie, I think you maybe just still have your hand up from earlier. Let me know if that's not true.
It was up from earlier, but my question would piggyback onto my question from earlier, because it was just brought up, like if we're going to ask the public to prioritize current businesses or districts, we should include with that, like, what conceptually policy wise that might mean for the people who use that district. Because I think it's kind of a jump for people to understand at a very high level when you just have a bullet point that says, do you want to prioritize the districts and the businesses, exactly policy wise what that might mean, even though I'm very clear that a plan doesn't have policy in it, but ideas of how that would play out on a street level.
So Leslie, just to make sure that I hear that correctly, are you talking about like helping people understand the trade-offs of those decisions, or what can you clarify a little bit more when you mean
Yeah.
by how it plays at the street level?
Yeah, so like when you're looking at, when the public is considering these
Right.
new places, these new nodes, to understand what that might look like for them. And you did a pretty good job in terms of the slides that show Diamond Hill. I see that. But what you just said like 5 minutes ago regarding, do you want to prioritize this district? I mean, are you asking the public, do they want that or not? Or are you asking them, if so, do you want, we need to put certain policies in place? Like, I feel like there's a disconnect between what the public might not understand what their role is in making this choice.
Sorry, just to interject real quickly, a couple people have asked to see the example slide as we're discussing this. Sorry, and go ahead.
Right, yeah.
So if I could jump in, Sung, I think Leslie, what Sung was presenting and what's shown on this slide and what we were intending to ask the community to keep it pretty simple is like, out of these recommendations shown, these bullets, which one would you prioritize? Like, which one should we have, should the city focus on right away? Where should they dedicate resources, and kind of to be able to lift some of these recommendations higher on the list versus what could take more time. It's not necessarily prioritizing locations. It's more about like reordering these, like which one would you want the city to focus on right away?
Thank you for that. And I apologize for having my camera off most of the time. I'm currently in my car, but thank you for helping me with that.
Thanks, Shane.
Did anyone else have thoughts on kind of the approach to this? Whether it feels simple enough, whether it feels like a good, thoughts on how engaging it would be? Does anyone feel like it's unclear or like have concerns about it?
Hi, this is Trupti. I get the reason that you'd need to keep it simple, and easy, but what I think is gonna get lost is all the devils are in the details, and keeping it simple kind of means keeping it very superficial, and that's fine because you need to do that because it's impossible to get into the weeds. But what do you think you're going to get what you need when you're keeping it at such a superficial level? Will you get really down to, the detail needed, I guess, when somebody's weighing in on something of this magnitude? That's my only concern. I don't have a response to that. We struggle with thinking that we're not getting in the weeds enough, and we're getting way more in the weeds. How does the general public kind of understand what they're actually weighing in on when they're only seeing kind of the tip of the iceberg? Because that's all there's time to get into. That's my only concern.
Does anybody have thoughts on ways to balance that? On ways to balance like a recommendation or an idea for how to balance that kind of needing the detail to understand it, but keeping it engaging in a way that's accessible to the general public?
And just so, can I jump in real quick, just so everyone understands the general public, the public draft. So you're viewing the steering committee draft on Conveo. The public draft will have the same format. And so for those that want to dive in and read every recommendation and point out things on maps and edit text and all of that, they will be able to do that in the document, just like you're doing. So I mean, that's one way. I just wanted to make sure everyone understands that that format will be available for the public.
No, thank you, Janie. So there'll be options for more detail, but in terms of, does anyone have, I know that we wanted to save time for the public here at the end, but did anyone else have thoughts on how we could, how improve kind of this form of engagement, I guess, but in terms of prioritization?
And I would say, if maybe there's no additional feedback, just to respond to Trupti, I think it's just a matter of like, what do people most care about? Like when we talk about enhancing neighborhood districts, it's like, you know, we have multiple plan recommendations on how to best address them. Is it really about making sure new spaces are provided if new development happens for, you know, the active street level conversation? Is it about how we think about preserving local and existing culturally relevant businesses? And not that they can't be all on the, you know, happen together or at the same time, depending on the resources that we have. But I think it's just helping us identify early on the priorities. And I think throughout kind of early phases of the project, we kind of know what they are too, but this is another time for people to weigh in on just kind of understanding the values of the community through this additional outreach phase. And then it just provides us more data as well as we think through implementation. So I can, again, we just have 10 minutes, so I can open, I can go through the next step slides, knowing that that might change a little bit in the next week or two. But this presentation has been provided to you guys, so feel free to review the last few slides. But quickly, what it was about was just kind of revisiting and kind of reminding folks about implementation and what that looks like from changing and revising future regulations, potentially the Denver zoning code. That's what largely the land use and built form section is about, guiding funding and then helping identify community partnerships. So I might as well just present it now that I'm presenting it, but at a quick, a little bit quickly here is that some of the recommendations in the plan, you know, there's a laundry list of, you know, things that we need to get done to help advance the vision, but there are a couple of some of the strategies we've identified in our draft recommendations that we thought could be advanced quicker, maybe parallel to the plan process, where we believed there's a broad community support and it's less complex in nature for staff to take on. And some of those things that we've identified early on through our conversations was to rezone to allow ADUs in the rest of Sunnyside. There's a lot of individual rezonings happening and requests happening, so we thought that just made sense to proactively do as staff. And I don't want to say that it's an easy and less time intensive, but it is less complex in the nature, and there's more community support. And so it gives us the confidence to devote more staff time and know that it might be something we can accomplish as part of the plan adoption by the end of the year. And then the other one is that North Federal, Emily, right now is the only remaining area along Federal that doesn't have a mixed use zone district. And the current zoning really just promotes auto-oriented development patterns like drive-throughs and those kinds of nature. So we thought, you know, to respond to community concerns about that directly, that's something we can think about rezoning to a mixed use zone district. So we're continuing to think through these, but just know that we as staff have been kind of thinking about, you know, what are some of these strategies we could advance a bit quicker, where we think we have more support and have the resources to take on. So I can also, maybe we just leave it up for public comment, and then I can go to next steps. Grace?
That sounds good. Either Michael, who was in the chat, said that he had a public comment that he would like to share. Michael, you can maybe unmute yourself and
Sure,
share.
I just
Thanks.
typed
Oh,
it.
you typed it. I see you just.
I'll just state it here, I mean, earlier I was listening to my longtime good friend, Tim Bird, and we've been dealing with planning issues together for 25 years in North Denver and in the neighborhood. But when I look at the draft document here, what I see in the descriptions of major corridors and streetcar corridors is that there are nodes of intensity. And then in between are basically areas of preservation. That's what I'm seeing. And I think what Tim was seeing was that there was, in some cases, a proposal for continuous corridors of intensity. But I can't find that as I flip through the pages of the PDF.
Thanks, Michael. Did Sung or Janie, did you want to provide any clarification? So
I've been
Was that-
emailing Tim. I'm multitasking here. So Tim, check your inbox. I think there is there's some concerns that we'll work through with Tim in the graphics. And there is one recommendation that I'm already seeing that could be worded differently based on, I think, his concern about the adaptive reuse recommendations. But I did, send Michael the map so that you can zoom in on it, and did reiterate that really is the intent, is that there are the nodes of activity along these corridors and that residential remains in between. We just need to connect the dots and make that clearer.
Thank you, Janie, for responding to that. Michael, did that clarify it for you?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Did anyone else from the public have a comment, a question or comment to share? You can kind of raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak up.
Okay, great. For the Conveo document, the most recent upload you guys received, I think a lot of the new content that you haven't seen yet, it's probably the focus area in the neighborhood sections. So if you want to devote more time there to provide feedback, that would be great. And then, continue to send us summer events. We have a few things flagged, including the Sunnyside Barbecue, Highland 4th of July, and a few other ones. So feel free, just a reminder to continue to send us those events so that we can be there for pop-ups and kind of engage residents. And if for yard signs, we do have more updated yard signs, so let us know if you would like a new one. And I know others from the committee have handed it out to other residents as well, or your neighbors. So let us know how many you might need, and so we can also just keep tracks on kind of who we're giving them out to, so we can work with them as well. So those are kind of the two specific announcements related to outreach. The next meeting does closely align with our June community workshop. So I was anticipating to cancel that one, since we will have a larger outreach in a community workshop in June. And then I think what Cheney just kind of suggested right now is we'll follow with next steps on how we can kind of respond to the feedback about the neighborhood specific meetings, and kind of following with additional material on to kind of further explain what has or hasn't been addressed. And I think,
Yeah, and so Mike, I'm reading and understanding that you have significant concerns with some of the land use stuff and as I said, you know, and I get it, we don't want to rush it. As to reiterate what Sung said, it is a draft plan. We will still be working through these. I'm already thinking in my head, you know, maybe after the release of the draft plan, we could have steering committees host, you know, a neighborhood session where, you know, you know, maybe more than the steering committee get together and talk about these issues. But with your immediate concern, I think I would love to see you summarize, you know, in addition to making those comments in the Conveyo document. We have not implemented any of the edits yet, so that wasn't included in the final steering committee draft. We are working through those edits and in the land use section, but we, you know, your major concerns, I would love to see them summarized in an email to me personally and Sung, so that we can address them as soon as possible. Because we do have this launch event on June 22nd, but, you know, offline, we will discuss, you know, how we can, you know, make everyone feel comfortable about the release of the draft plan and addressing your major concerns before the public reviews it.
Thank you for that, Cheney. So do I understand that on the 22nd, you're releasing the public draft plan?
that is the workshop, community workshop, where, yeah, that we've scheduled and have been advertising.
So that is the public draft plan. So the public is going to see something on the 22nd, and it may or may not incorporate comments that the steering committee has made.
Again, if we're not incorporating specific feedback, there will be a very specific reason for why, and we can explain it. But, you know, I do want to again provide the assurance that vast majority of the comments have been incorporated. So we'll continue to work through the specific issues that you guys raised in the short term. But if there are specific comments where we feel like needs to be addressed as part of a larger community conversation, we'll identify those. So
just to be clear, so I need to attend the meeting on the 22nd to find out what you've absorbed or recommended or rejected from my comments in the Conveyo document?
No, we'll try to have send the document with, you know, the how we approach the comments, and then through kind of the short-term meeting, we can discuss those specifics.
So and chime in other committee members. Can we see the document that you're going to present on the 22nd before the 22nd?
Yeah, I think we should be able to. Yes.
And like a week before, and also is there an opportunity, like we've been talking about in chat, to have some neighborhood specific meetings to talk block by block? Because the Jefferson Park map that's in the current draft is wrong.
Right.
So I want to make sure that those are fixed, and I would imagine that Tim and others want to see their respective areas addressed before it's released for public comment.
Right, and we're working through those specific issues. So we'll follow with next steps and what these meetings will look like. But with
I don't know, Tim, Lexi, Trupti, I mean, do I have any alignment here, or am I?
So all I can say is you haven't seen our comments yet on land use. We haven't made the comments yet. You want our comments by June 6th.
No, this is the June 6th one is for the new material provided.
That's what I'm saying.
The focus area.
I'm a full-time teacher. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm a full-time teacher.
Jamie, if you could put yourself on mute, or I could maybe mute. I think I can hear.
Oh, I think she's speaking up.
Oh, was she talking? Jamie, were you? Sorry. Hi. I'm not sure. Jamie, you might have to unmute yourself. I don't know if you were speaking to us.
I
Sorry.
was thinking when prior to you muting me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you had a
that's
phone call. I'm sorry.
No, I need more time than June 6th. I want to meet with Sung or speak with Sung and the Councilwoman Sandoval about the Conveo document so that I can make sure that my comments are heard as well. Because again, I came in, I came in when you guys were already long into the process. So I'm still playing catch up. So in regards, this is still big picture to me. And I just am now getting it that I can make these comments into this Conveo document. And I have not done that. I need time to review that document and have opportunity to put whatever my thoughts are in that. And I'm a full-time teacher. It's last week of school. I'm way overwhelmed. 1 week after school is not going to be enough time.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry again for muting you, Jamie. Sung, I don't know if you, and it sounds like maybe, go ahead, Jamie.
Some of the deadlines, so, and this is communicated in the emails, and I understand you guys are super busy people and you're committing a lot to be on this committee. We had asked, we've been presenting chapter by chapter, and each chapter we've provided deadlines to provide comments by. The land use chapter recommendations, the area-wide land use recommendations, that deadline, Sung, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the 16th of May, which was like last week. So we're drinking through a fire hose right now. We're going through all of your comments and we are working on edits. That's why we're not robots. We can't, they haven't been implemented yet, but they are being worked on, Mike. And so we will get those, the spreadsheet of the comments and what we addressed and the updated document just as soon as we possibly can. But and we can continue to talk about how we have these neighborhood conversations, but I just wanted to let you know that the land use comments were due on May 16th for us to implement. And then these comments are based on the focus areas and the introduction. The neighborhood chapter and the introduction is due June 6th.
So that's just the final, it just is what it is in regards to our community. And specifically for me, because I was brought in after the fact. I don't breathe and eat this stuff like you guys do. I mean, you're going to move forward with what you want to do anyway, but I just feel like that's just, everyone is saying it's not enough time.
Jamie, am I hearing maybe you need some extra support to kind of get up to speed? Maybe I feel like, I mean, is that?
Yes, absolutely. And Sung has helped me one other time, but I just, the support that I got wasn't enough to, I didn't know what to ask. I didn't know anything. And I'm barely learning now stuff. And I'm just really frustrated because I just feel like you guys are going to do whatever you're going to do anyway. And so I don't know, right now I'm sick and it's just not a good time for me to be relaying my feelings. It's not, I don't have enough time. June 6th, you're saying you're not robots, neither are we. This is your job. This is not my job. I'm trying to fight for my community that I was born and raised in, and I need more time.
Yeah.
And for the question, for the stuff you guys were asking before, like, how can we make it better? What can we do? I think you heard what I think a lot of people out in the community feel about and where distrust and disengagement is happening exactly for the kinds of things Jamie just outlined. People feel exactly this. You're going to do what you're going to do anyway. Why waste my time by showing up to a meeting? I think you guys need to think about that a little bit more. And because you're even hearing it in the steering committee and it's being ignored too, because we're saying it's not enough time. You're moving too fast. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about having the neighborhood meetings. I think people, at least I did, we thought that these neighborhood meetings are going to happen before anything goes to the public. So what's the point of having those after it goes to the public if the goal is to discuss some of the meat about what goes to the public? So I think you guys need to slow down. This is a deadline. It's a self-imposed deadline, regardless, you know? It's not like there's a freight train coming for us and we got to get off the track. We're creating this deadline. So I think deadlines can be changed. You're hearing it from the steering committee. You're hearing it from people who haven't been engaged the whole time. But what Jamie said is the kind of things I sense from the community all the time and why we don't get people to the table. Thank you. I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you for your feedback, Trupti. Oh, I've heard Sung say that we're gonna think through how we can get better feedback and give more time and help process this and get feedback. But I think Sung, you need to go back and figure out what that might look like and have discussions about.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, and Jamie, and I'm hearing like you're needing maybe some individual support to get you up to speed, and we don't want you to feel frustrated or that your input isn't valued. And so I think maybe I don't know, Sung, if for it taking some time to answer some extra questions or bring you up to speed would be an additional meeting with Jamie might be helpful. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I think it's necessary though, for those that can stay on a little bit longer, we have to talk this through. The point of the neighborhood meeting on the 22nd is to release a draft plan so that the community, the public, can see and read the draft recommendations in order to respond to them. So, I mean, all of these recommendations have come from, the previous, 2 years almost of engagement we've done, and they need to be able to respond to something. And the steering committee draft is your draft to provide input, and you guys do represent, your community and your neighborhoods, and we're hearing those specific concerns, and that's why we've asked for your comments. And Mike, we will, look specifically at your comments, and clearly you have some concerns about that. But I mean, just to open it up, should we cancel the June 22nd launch meeting? Is that what you guys are suggesting? I mean, we can have a land use workshop at that public meeting. I just
is it possible to change that meeting to some degree where we're getting feedback in a different way, where it's not specifically about releasing the draft? I know that was the plan, but can we keep that meeting and try to make specific questions and groups and with the community of I don't know, is there any way to use that and not make it the launch, but just kind of push things back a little bit? I don't know the extent of what you guys can do. I know you guys are working really hard, and I think we all acknowledge that. I think there's obviously frustrations, but you guys have done a ton, and there's a ton of information going around, and everybody has their own opinion. And so please don't let that be lost. We really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. I think it's just, again, it feels rushed. And I think maybe we can use that and just tweak the purpose of the meeting. It's all on our calendars. I think canceling it, doesn't sound like a great idea. You've been working towards it. Is there maybe that's something you can take back to whoever, can make that decision. But I think, maybe using it to some other way to get more feedback in a different form. I don't know.
Could we do a charrette style neighborhood by neighborhood where, a lot of the graphics we saw today, which I think a lot of people commented that was kind of easier to understand. Could we use those graphics and some of the recommendations in a charrette style specific to each of the neighborhoods? So people who show up there, they go to their neighborhood and they're talking, you guys can talk about what you're thinking as a recommendation, and people can react to it with, those comments being taken neighborhood by neighborhood. So maybe we can kind of do both of those pieces, or at least maybe that format that Lexi was talking about would that be a better format and easier for folks to focus on their neighborhood specifically and not spend time listening to a 4-part thing when all they're interested in is theirs? Just throwing it out there. Thanks.
Do other people have thoughts on that? On what Trupti had suggested for the style?
You know, I
Mm.
think Trupti's, this is Leslie, I think that Trupti's suggestion is fantastic. I think that when people go to these meetings, they're looking for specific information about the area closest to them. So if we could do, if we could respectfully separate our meeting, but I also want to, I like that we are putting forward the draft recommendations, and I would almost suggest that we do it a couple days in advance or a few days in advance, so people have time to digest before they come to the meeting and can come to the planners with their questions. Because to be fed a draft recommendation at the meeting itself is a little overwhelming. But I agree that we should come forth with the draft recommendations, because I think it's really hard for people to conceptualize and be specific about what they want to see. I mean, it's easier for people to see a draft and be like, okay, I disagree with this, or I very much agree with this, than to keep spitballing as we have for the last 2 years about hopes and dreams. So I hope to see draft recommendations. It would be fantastic if the public would have access to that a couple days or more in advance, so they have time to digest it, for those who have time, so they can come to the meetings prepared with questions. And then just to support, again, what Trupti said, to keep it neighborhood specific, because I think a lot of these folks are coming in wanting to hear specifically about the area that impacts them the most. Thanks.
No, thanks for that feedback, Leslie.
I can't find my
Any
hand raising thing, but I do agree with that. But also I wonder if we do get those draft plans out prior to the meeting, how do we ensure that they're getting put out in multiple languages so that everybody can access the information? And then how do we ensure that they're actually understanding what they're looking at? Because a lot of people, that's why you don't have the input from the majority of the community, is because they don't know what they're looking at or why they're looking at it. So they just bypass it. So how do we ensure that they're able to understand what is actually going on? What are they actually looking at? That's the problem. These people in these communities that have been here forever, they have no clue what's going on. They're just going with whatever's happening because they don't know.
Thank you, Jamie, for that feedback. And I know that if you guys wanted to speak to translation or like, I know that we've discussed in other meeting strategies for engagement, like using the promotoras and things like that to make sure that we're engaging, making sure we're presenting things in an approachable way. Did you guys want to
Naomi, go ahead.
speak to that?
Yeah, maybe I think it's probably a good opportunity to just take a step back to talk about the engagement plan and what this event on the 22nd actually is. So the idea is that the draft plan will be public, but this specific event is meant as a celebration. It's a giant community resource fair. We've got 14 plus community partner organizations that are going to be coming. And in addition to that, we have, a station where there will be information about the Near Northwest Plan, but we completely understand that it is a huge thing to digest, and don't expect people to be able to engage deeply potentially at this event. But it's an opportunity to raise awareness, to talk to people about it, to present some of the prioritization questions, and be there to discuss it. And then the next month and a half, 2 months, is us going into individual communities, having pop-up events, going to where people are, going to community events, and having those opportunities to have those really focused one-on-one conversations about neighborhoods specifically, because we will be physically in places. So that's the general outreach strategy that we discussed. And in terms of language access, absolutely. We've been contracting with the promotoras again, and we're going to be having them handing out information and making conversations leading up to the launch event, as well as another phase of outreach afterwards, especially focusing heavily on Chaffee Park, because we know that there are kind of fewer events and gathering spaces where our pop-ups can naturally be there. And so they're also suggesting to us some specific events that we can go to out in the community that are going to be Spanish language focused. And we're working really closely with them on that. So just to kind of talk again a little bit about what the launch event is and sort of its purpose and the general 2-month long kind of outreach process, where it really is, you know, to get people to, if they choose and want to engage in detail with the plan, there's a couple of different ways they can do that. And again, totally recognizing it's massive, it's hard to get through. People can go online and interact with it in Conveo, as was mentioned, but we'll also have physical copies of it. And, you know, our pop-ups and being in the community is hopefully an opportunity to, you know, to have people engage, you know, be able to have a, I don't know what you call it, a liaison, you know, have planners there to talk about it more in depth, as well as happily going to any events, presenting to RNOs, again, multiple touch points, opportunities for people to ask questions and kind of get, you know, a guide through what exactly these things mean and how they can give feedback on the draft plan.
Thank you for speaking to that, Naomi. Jamie, did that help at all kind of understand more what the engagement would look like?
Yeah, I do understand what the engagement looks like. Me personally, I don't feel like it's enough. I don't feel like you're saying, we're here. If the people come to us, we're here. But these people are not going to come to you. The people that I'm speaking for or that I'm speaking up, they're not going to come to you. You have to go to them and you have to engage them.
So we are going to be
want to be welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I completely agree with you, and that's why we're again, we've contracted with the Promotora network. So what they do, they go door to door. They talk to people. They go to places where people naturally gather, to the corner stores, laundromats, and again, go door to door and have conversations with people. They're all bilingual. So they really are the community liaisons that we're working with really closely, helping to have those conversations there. So they're going out to where people are and trying to do that outreach. They did that the last couple of years and have been really, really helpful in you know, reaching the people that you're completely right. They're not going to just show up. We can't expect them to come, and especially you know, to come and just engage with this thing where it's this large, complicated plan.
And
so where can we find documentation about what they've done, who they've spoken with, and what kind of feedback that they've received? Yeah, where can we find that, you know, these things are happening and that they are reaching the people? Where's that documentation?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a community, forget what the official name is, the engagement reports. So those are available on the website, the NPI Project Archive website, but we can also send those to you directly. And they summarize the reports that the Promotora sent to us. They you know, had to log their hours and their conversations, and there's a whole kind of analysis of the comments and the themes and things that they heard and the amount of hours that they spent in the community. So we can absolutely share that.
I would love that, because I was born and raised in this neighborhood, and I may be able to say, oh, well, here's another place you may go, or
absolutely,
you know,
yeah,
something like that. So
absolutely.
If I could get, you know, somebody to reach out to me with that, I would love to be able to be a part of that or see what that looks like.
Thank you, Jamie. And yeah, absolutely.
And then, and just maybe the last couple of comments, and then we do need to close out, but just want to make sure that people know that we will debrief and follow up with next steps, so you guys aren't, left with nothing, no follow-up.
So I think Leslie's hand maybe was up from before, but I might be wrong. Mike, I know you've had your hand up for some time now. So if you can maybe close us out with the last comment.
Sure. Thank you, guys. I mean, I really do appreciate all the work that you guys are doing for this. I understand how many opinions go into this and how, you know, conflicted it can be. I don't think the land use part of this plan is ready for public consumption. I think the rest of it is probably really close or maybe done. Ashton dropped off the call, but I think he had a great suggestion. Between now and that date, I think you need to do 4 separate meetings with the steering committee members in each of the areas to hear specifically about their land use comments. I mean, I know I have block by block recommendations of things that I agree or disagree with on the plan. And I would really like to make sure that those are being heard and folded into whatever is eventually presented to the public. I had a great conversation with Sung earlier, but I'm not convinced about some of the recommendations that are in the plan.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're like staff recommendations or they're a recommendation for a person, or there's like, you know, a consensus on it. But I'm really conflicted about that. And I'm just not really aligned with presenting the Jefferson Park maps as is to a broader audience.
And Mike, I think those are the cleanups that we will definitely get as part of a public review draft, but we'll meet with you as part of this additional follow-up that we'll do in the next couple of weeks to do that. I really think it's more of a oversight on our end when we're producing the draft land use section for your specific comments. So I think, you know, those are kind of cleanup things we can work on. And I'm not here to say that we're ignoring all those things. I think we just need a time. Like I haven't opened up the draft land use section conveyor document because I was up working on the rest of the plan to produce. So just know that, you know, we're looking at it, we'll be looking at it. And then, you know, for the red flag concerns, we can work with you guys to address that, Tim, Mike. But we do have to conclude the meeting, but I will make sure to follow up with an email kind of based on everything we've heard. So.
Thank you. Thank you again for all the hard work that you all are putting into this project.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for staying on.
Thank you. The meeting was very interesting.
Thank you.